It was a Friday night like any other at Delta Psi, with the bass thumping through the grand old frat house and red cups littering nearly every surface. As one of the senior members, I, Zane, had seen my fair share of wild nights, but this one was special. It was our annual pledge invitation party, and everyone was buzzing with a mix of excitement and beer-fueled bravado. Caradoc, the pledge in question, was a quiet guy, not your typical frat star. Earlier that week, some of the guys thought it would be hilarious to make him wear a grotesque mask, a gnarled, twisted face that looked like it belonged in a horror movie, and parade him around campus. It was just a prank, we thought, harmless fun, but the look in Caradoc's eyes when the mask came off said otherwise. It was a mixture of humiliation and something else, something darker. The party was in full swing when I stepped outside for some air, leaving the cacophony of shouts and music behind me. The backyard was cooler, the moon a dim light filtering through the branches of the old oaks that surrounded our property. That's when I heard it, the softest whisper of a footstep behind me. I turned, expecting to see one of my brothers sneaking out with a freshman, but there was no one there. Chalking it up to the alcohol, I headed back inside. The hallway seemed unusually dark, the lights flickering as if straining against a sudden drain of power. A chill ran down my spine, the hairs on my arms standing on end. I shook off the feeling and pushed the heavy door to the main party room open. The scene inside had changed. The music still played, but there was a palpable tension in the air. I found Dwayne, one of my frat brothers, pale and shaken, staring at something on the floor. It was Rowan, another brother, lying motionless, a replica of the grotesque mask strapped to his face. A bolt, a Dan crossbow bolt, was lodged in his chest. What the hell happened? I gasped, my heart pounding as I knelt down beside him. Dwayne couldn't form words, just pointed towards the darkened corridor that led to the back rooms. He's here. Caradoc. With a crossbow, Dwayne finally stammered. The reality of the situation hit me like a brick. This was no longer a party, it was a hunting ground. The next few hours were a blur of chaos and fear. We found 3 more of our brothers, each isolated, each wearing a mask, and each cruelly picked off from the shadows with deadly precision. The party dissolved into a frantic scramble for safety as everyone realized that the frat house had turned into a trap. I rallied a group of guys, including Dwayne and Owen, our chapter president, to barricade the doors and call for help. But the phone lines were dead, and our cell signals were mysteriously jammed. We need to stick together and find a way out, I urged, trying to keep my voice steady. Dwayne nodded, gripping a baseball bat with white-knuckled hands. Let's do it. Let's get this psycho. We moved cautiously, jumping at every shadow, every sound. As we rounded a corner, a figure stepped out from a doorway, the dim light glinting off the tip of a crossbow. It was Caradoc, his face obscured by that same grotesque mask. He didn't say a word, just raised the crossbow and fired. Owen screamed as he went down, a bolt through his shoulder, pinning him to the wall. Dwayne and I scattered, diving for cover, but I knew we were outmatched and outmaneuvered. In the chaos, a plan formed in my desperate mind. If we could get to the attic, we could maybe get a signal out or at least barricade ourselves in until help arrived. I motioned to Dwayne, and together we made a break for the narrow staircase, dodging another of Caradoc's bolts that thudded into the wood where my head had been seconds before. We were halfway up the stairs when an explosion rocked the house. The smell of gasoline and smoke hit us, and it was clear Caradoc had set the frat house on fire. With no way out, we pushed forward, the heat building behind us, the sound of the fire roaring like a beast unleashed. The attic was stifling, the air thick with dust and the growing stench of smoke from below. Dwayne and I slammed the door shut, pushing an old dresser against it with trembling hands. The crackle and pop of the fire grew louder outside. The flames painted the windows orange, the heat pressing in like an unwelcome crowd. "We're going to cook up here, aren't we?" Dwayne's voice was barely a whisper, raw with fear. "No, we're not," I replied, more to convince myself than him. "We're going to make it out. We have to." My hands fumbled with my phone again, desperation giving way to a sliver of hope as I noticed a bar of signal, faint but present. I dialed 911, the phone ringing through to emergency services. I explained our situation in hurried, gasping sentences: the attack, the fire, our location. Soon, the sound of sirens in the distance offered a lifeline, but with the relief came the stark reality of our immediate danger. The fire was spreading, the heat unbearable. Smoke seeped into the attic, making it hard to see, harder to breathe. "We need to break a window, get some air," I choked out, my eyes stinging. Together, we staggered to the nearest window, pushing against the old glass. It gave way with a crash, fresh air rushing in, battling the smoke that roiled around us. Below, the flickering lights of fire trucks and police cars pierced the night, a chaotic ballet of rescue and urgency. I leaned out of the window, shouting for help, my voice hoarse. A firefighter spotted us, raising his radio to call for a ladder. Relief was so close, yet the fire was closer, licking at the structure of the house, threatening to bring us down with it. Then, a loud series of crashes from below made us jump. Through the smoke, a figure emerged at the bottom of the attic stairs. It was Caradoc, the mask gone, his face a canvas of pain and rage. He staggered, clutching his side where blood seeped through his shirt. "You don't understand," he gasped, the fight draining from him. "They made me a monster." I stared at him, the chaos around us narrowing into the sharp point of this final confrontation. "You didn't have to do this, Caradoc. You could have walked away." "Could I?" His laugh was a hollow sound, broken and sad. He took a step forward, then another, before collapsing, his body giving way, succumbing to his injuries and the smoke filling his lungs. The room spun, the heat a tangible weight on my chest. Dwayne and I retreated to the window, the ladder finally arriving. Firefighters climbed towards us. I took one last look at Caradoc, lying motionless on the floor. His plan had ended in his own destruction, a tragic footnote to a night of horror. We were helped onto the ladder, descending into the cool night air, away from the heat and death. Sirens wailed, lights flashed, and I realized how close we had come to not making it out alive. The ground felt unreal beneath my feet, the normal world a stark contrast to the hell we had just escaped. In the days that followed, the investigation would reveal the depths of Caradoc's planning, the lengths to which he had gone to exact his revenge. The masks, the crossbow, the fire, it was all a meticulously crafted nightmare born from a moment of humiliation that he just couldn't move past. I survived, but like the charred remains of the frat house, I knew I'd never be the same. Our tale takes us to the outskirts of a sleepy college town, where an abandoned house stood shrouded in darkness. This house, once a grand estate, had long been forgotten, its windows shattered and its walls covered in ivy. The locals whispered tales of its haunted past, but few dared to venture near. The fraternity known as the Guardians chose this house for their final pledge challenge. It was a tradition that had been passed down for generations, a test of courage and resilience. The pledges were tasked with spending a night alone in the abandoned house, each one having to confront their deepest fears within its decaying walls. Among them was Drake, a quiet, introspective student. He had always been more comfortable with books than with people, and this challenge was his way of proving himself. As the sun set, the pledges were driven to the house. The journey was filled with nervous laughter and whispered reassurances, but as they approached the house, a heavy silence fell over them. The air grew heavy with dread as they stepped out of the van. The house loomed before them, its dark silhouette a stark contrast against the twilight sky. Drake found himself standing before a door hanging precariously from its hinges. The wood was splintered and rotting, and the doorknob was cold and unyielding. He took a deep breath and stepped inside. The floorboards creaked under his weight, and the air was thick with the smell of decay and mildew. The walls were covered in peeling wallpaper, and the ceiling sagged ominously. The floorboards groaned beneath his feet, each step echoing through the empty halls, a reminder of the house's long abandonment. He shone his flashlight around, taking in the dilapidated state of the house. The beam of light revealed broken furniture, shattered glass, and layers of dust that had settled over the years. Cobwebs hung from every corner, and broken furniture lay scattered across the floor. It was as if time had stood still within these walls. As darkness descended, the silence was broken by unsettling noises. The wind howled through the broken windows, and the house seemed to groan and sigh. Drake tried to convince himself it was just the house settling. He repeated this mantra in his mind, trying to quell the rising tide of fear. But deep down, he felt he was being watched. The hairs on the back of his neck stood on end, and he couldn't shake the feeling of unseen eyes following his every move. He spent what felt like an eternity huddled in a corner, the minutes stretching into hours, and the oppressive silence weighed heavily on him. Then he heard a soft whisper coming from the floor above. It was faint, almost imperceptible, but it sent a chill down his spine. Curiosity won over fear, and he made his way towards the staircase. Each step was a battle against the urge to turn and run. As he reached the top, the whispering grew louder. It was a low, murmuring sound, like a conversation just out of earshot. It seemed to be coming from a room at the end of the hallway. The door was slightly ajar, and a sliver of light spilled out into the dark corridor. He approached cautiously and pushed the door open. The hinges squealed in protest, and the door swung open to reveal an empty room. The room was empty, but the whispering had stopped. The silence was deafening, and Drake's heart pounded in his chest. Drake noticed something strange about the far wall. There were markings, faint and almost hidden beneath layers of grime. It looked as if someone had tried to conceal something. The markings formed a pattern, a series of symbols that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. He approached the wall and knocked on it. It sounded hollow. His curiosity piqued. He began to tear away at the flimsy wall, revealing a small, dark space. Inside was a small wooden box covered in strange symbols. The box was unlocked. He hesitated, his hand hovering over the lid. After a moment, he opened it. The lid creaked open, revealing a single sheet of yellowed parchment. The paper was brittle and ancient, the ink seemed to shimmer in the dim light. As he read, the words seemed to shift and change before his eyes. They spoke of an ancient evil bound to the house, a curse that had claimed countless lives. The words were a warning, a plea for anyone who found the parchment to leave and never return. Drake felt a cold dread creep up his spine. The air seemed to grow colder, and he could feel the weight of the house's dark history pressing down on him. Suddenly, the flashlight flickered and died. The darkness closed in around him, and he was plunged into a world of shadows. A blood-curdling scream echoed through the house, a sound of pure terror that seemed to come from everywhere at once. Drake dropped the parchment and stumbled back, his heart racing and his breath coming in short, panicked gasps. He heard the doorknob rattle, and the door swung open. He braced himself for the worst, but it was one of the other pledges. Relief washed over Drake. They exchanged a look of mutual understanding, both shaken by their experiences. They left the room, but the experience had changed them. The house had revealed its secrets, and they would carry the memory of that night with them forever. The abandoned house remained a testament to the darkness that lay hidden beneath the surface of the world. It stood as a reminder of the unseen forces that lurk in the shadows, waiting to be discovered by those brave enough to seek them out. They called it the Omega Protocol, a new hazing ritual for the tech age, they said. Just a bit of fun, Ethan, the president, had assured us, a smirk playing on his lips. Fun turned to dread the moment they demanded our social media passwords. "It's all part of the initiation, bro," said Harold, his voice dripping with condescension. "Trust us." "Yeah, right. Trust the guys who live on a diet of ramen and questionable hygiene." But we were desperate to belong. This was Delta Phi, the top frat at Western University. We handed over our passwords like surrendering hostages. The first night was quiet. Then, the morning after, my phone buzzed incessantly, notifications from every platform I used. Confused, I opened Twitter to find a picture of me passed out in last night's pizza box fort with the caption, "Ethan, more future frat pre, more like future frat nap champion." My cheeks burned. My friends knew about the hazing, but seeing it blasted out there for everyone to see, shame gnawed at me. The attacks came daily. Embarrassing childhood photos surfaced on Facebook. My perfectly curated Instagram feed was hijacked with nonsensical posts about cat memes and conspiracy theories. My Snapchats were filled with drunken videos of myself making incoherent pronouncements. The worst part: the isolation. Friends stopped texting. My family called, their voices laced with concern. My carefully constructed online persona, the one I'd spent years building, was crumbling. I felt like a ghost in my own digital life. Sleep became a luxury. Every notification was a potential nightmare. We, the pledges, became a collective of nervous wrecks, constantly checking our phones, afraid of what digital humiliation awaited. One night, fueled by a potent mix of fear and desperation, I snuck into the Delta Phi house. My heart hammered a frantic rhythm against my ribs as I crept towards the war room, the place where the magic, or should I say misery, happened. The door creaked open. Inside, bathed in the blue glow of a dozen monitors, sat the senior brothers, each with an evil grin plastered on their faces. They were like puppeteers, manipulating our lives through the strings of our online profiles. Suddenly, a hand clamped over my mouth. Harold's face, twisted with a menacing smile, filled my vision. Busted, pledge. The next few days were a blur: sleep deprivation, threats, and a constant barrage of online bullying. Ethan offered a way out: spread the word about the Omega Protocol. Tell everyone how awesome it is. But could I live a lie, knowing what it did to others? The isolation, the fear, it was a form of digital torture, and I wouldn't be a part of it. Exhausted but resolute, I went to the university IT department. My story, along with screenshots of the hijacked accounts, painted a disturbing picture. The investigation was swift. The university, facing a potential PR nightmare, cracked down on Delta Phi. The house was shut down, the brothers suspended. But the damage was done. My online reputation, painstakingly built, lay in shattered fragments. My trust in technology, once unwavering, had been broken. The fear still lingers, a phantom notification in the back of my mind, a reminder of the night we were owned, not physically, but online. In the digital age, that might just be worse. A year later, I haven't fully recovered. The scars, both online and emotional, run deep. But I'm rebuilding, one awkward post at a time. The house remains empty, a monument to a cruel and twisted form of hazing. A stark reminder that sometimes the most terrifying monsters aren't lurking in the shadows, but behind a keyboard screen. Thanks for watching the video. Subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications to watch the latest videos.